Well, I want to welcome people watching this message in three different categories. I want to thank my friend Fredna for the suggestion to say, um, first of all, we welcome you that might be watching this online. And then we welcome our friends at Miracle Mile and also our friends at Watkins, Glen. Would you all welcome each other right now? We are today wrapping up a series called The Purpose-Driven Family. And I mentioned online, if you missed any of these and you want to go back and listen to them and watch them, you're welcome to do that. As I wrap this up today, I want to mention to you that next weekend we're starting a series that will take us through Labor Day weekend, I believe, on spiritual warfare, or putting on the whole armor of God, as we read about it in Ephesians chapter 6. So I hope you'll plan to be part of the series as we launch that next week. This last message in the series is called How to Build a Remarkable Life. And I don't know, Linda took me to task on my message last week. I was not consistent. I told about the old geezers, and then I also referred to the old codgers. And I'm not sure the difference in definition between a geezer and a codger. So today I have a few definitions that I'm going to lift up for you just to be more precise. But when I was a young codger, one of my first Sundays in the first church that I was actually responsible to preach every Sunday, and it was really pretty scary. What am I going to talk about? I just get done Sunday afternoon. Oh, no, I got to do this again next week. What am I going to do? A verse that really helped me, and I hadn't discovered McDonald's yet as my morning go-to place before Sunday, but there was a coffee shop in town, and I went there, and I clearly remember coming across this verse that I have lifted up to you as our memory verse. It's Psalm 127, verse 1. We believe it's written by Solomon, and would you read that with me? Unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchmen stand guard in vain. And where is that? Psalm 127, verse 1. That was a pivotal reminder for me that it's not me building the house, but it's God. And I think that's been a essential truth for me over the years. In one of those first churches, it wasn't that one, but it was a couple after that, and I had a bunch of them in quick succession. I had this guy named Floyd, and boy did Floyd love to talk, and he would repeat himself. I hope I'm not one of those codgers that repeats himself. Maybe I do that. Never mind, don't answer that. But one of the poems that he had memorized, and by associating with Floyd, I practically have this memorized. It comes back to me when I'm not even expecting it to. And it's an inspirational poem. It's not necessarily a Christian poem, but it's impacted my life. And Floyd's gone on to his reward many, many decades ago, but I still think of him when I read this. It says this: don't quit. When things go wrong, as they sometimes will, when the road you're trudging seems all uphill, when the funds are low and debts are high, and you want to smile but you have to sigh, when care is pressing you down a bit, rest if you must, but don't you quit. Life is queer with its twists and turns, as every one of us sometimes learns, and many a failure turns about when he might have won if he had stuck it out. Don't give up, though the pace seems slow. You might succeed with another blow. Often the struggler has given up when he might have captured the victor's cup, and he learned too late when the night slipped down how close he had been to the golden crown. Success is failure turned inside out, the silver tint of clouds of doubt, and you never can tell how close you are. It may be near when it seems afar. So stick to the fight when you're hardest hit. It's when things seem worst that you mustn't quit. Amen? That's essentially what it means to build a remarkable life. That indomitable spirit, that determination that I'm not going to quit, I'm going to continue. And the first definition that I would lift up to you that you see in your notes today is the definition of remarkable itself. And that is exceptional, outstanding, uncommon, worthy of attention. And when I think of that definition of remarkable, the person I think of in the Bible that stands out to me is the Old Testament person Daniel. and how it tells us, Daniel chapter 6, verse 3 gives us a little bit of a description of Daniel. Would you read that with me? Daniel so distinguished himself from all the other leaders by his remarkable qualities that the king planned to put him in charge over the entire empire. Daniel didn't start out seeking to be a leader. He wasn't looking to be in charge over the whole empire. He went to Babylon as a young teenager against his will. He was sort of kidnapped and taken into captivity, and they saw something promising about him, whether it was his physical appearance or his mental sharpness or whatever. And they said, we're going to take a couple years, and we're going to beat his Jewishness out of him, and we're going to teach him to be a good Babylonian, and they did everything they could to influence him to their culture. But Daniel had the strength of character and the foundation in his life that, yes, he managed to meet their expectations, but he never caved. He never gave in. He never compromised. Daniel dared to have a distinctively different lifestyle that distinguished him from all the others. We are called to dare to be a Daniel. Romans 12, verse 2. Now I'm just switching way over to the New Testament, but Paul says this. He says in Romans 12, 2, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you might prove what is the good and acceptable and perfect will of God. One of the first people to paraphrase the Bible, J.B. Phillips, took those words, do not be conformed, and he said, don't let the world squeeze you into its mold, but be different, be distinctively different. And that's what we're called to do, is to be different, and that leads to a remarkable quality. So I'd like to lift up to you the 4 R's for a remarkable life. Anybody remember back when they used to talk about the 3 R's of school? What were they? Reading, writing, arithmetic. Boy, they spelled funny back then, didn't they? Well, these actually do start with R's, these 4, and they are to learn to be respectful, reliable, resourceful, and resilient. These are 4 remarkable qualities that we need to develop a remarkable life. The first one, to be remarkable, means that I must learn to be respectful. And here's another definition for you. Respectful means to do 3 things: to appreciate the uniqueness, value the worth, and affirm the dignity of everyone because God made them. Appreciate the uniqueness, value the worth, affirm the dignity. Or Jesus teaches us in Matthew chapter 23, if you put yourself above others, you will be put down. But if you humble yourself, you will be honored by others. The language of the older translation that I first learned, for those who exalt themselves will be humbled, but those who humble themselves will be exalted. And so there's a great reversal that takes place. If we take the humble position, God will honor that. Or Jesus' follower Peter said in 1 Peter 2:17, show real respect to everyone. Now, I am told, I didn't count these, but there are around 50 references to showing respect in the Bible. And I've listed 10 of them, and I'm only going to specifically talk about 5 of the 10. If you did not get your notes to go along with this message, I think there's some right over here if you want to look over there. To whom does God expect me to show respect? The first one that I would single out is Leviticus 22:32, to respect God in God's name. And that's so important that we do that. Leviticus 22:32 says, do not profane my holy name, for I must be acknowledged as holy by the Israelites. I am the Lord who made you holy. So Leviticus tells us, do not profane God's holy name. That reminds me of Exodus 20, verse 7, which we know is part of the 10 Commandments. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Now, often we think of that meaning profanity, and we curse and we swear using God or Jesus in our swearing. That's true, but we also profane the name of God by the way we live. If people know that we claim to be a follower of Jesus Christ, and they see some glaring hypocrisy or some inconsistency, what does that say? Somebody said, "Who you are thunders so loudly that I can't hear what you're saying." So regardless of what we say, they're looking at who we are. And it's important that we not profane God's name, that we keep God and God's name especially revered. Moving down the list, I'm not going to refer specifically to the importance of respect for parents or our spouse or other church members or pastors and leaders. You can look at those on your own, or older people. Now, I have my little mini church audience here, and there's a number of them that are older than me, so I need to respect the elderly, here. I said I wasn't going to mention Sue's name, so I won't mention her name today. But then after older people, and our respect for for older people, we're then called to exhibit respect for unbelievers. And again, Jesus' close follower Peter says in 1 Peter 3:15 and 16, "Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. But do this with gentleness and respect, keeping a clear conscience, so that those who speak maliciously against your good behavior in Christ may be ashamed of their slander." We need to be out in the world rubbing shoulders with non-believers. That's part of our calling, is not to be afraid to rub up against people that need Jesus, but to be careful the way we offer respect to them. And there should be a gentleness and a genuineness about that makes all the difference in the world. The next one is to respect the poor. Proverbs 14:31 says, "Whoever oppresses the poor shows contempt for their maker, but whoever is kind to the needy honors God." So we need to respect unbelievers and to respect the needy. And that leads me to put a little plug in for something coming up in August. And we're going to be having, I think it's August 17th, or that weekend, we're going to be reaching out to our communities, I hope in both Schuyler and Chemung County, with backpacks for back to school. And we'd like to provide the backpacks themselves, and then we'll have some suggested ingredients or items to include in the backpacks. But isn't that a way to reach out to the unbelievers and to the poor, the people that don't have they can't just go and buy everything they need for their kid, that we can help them with that. So we lift up those examples, and then another one that I think is so very timely, the next category, to show respect for immigrants. And in this day, right now, when we're so divided as a nation over immigrants and what role they should play in our lives or our culture, I think of two verses from the Old Testament. Leviticus 19:33 says, "When a foreigner resides among you in your land, do not mistreat them." And then Deuteronomy 10:19, "And you are to love those who are foreigners, for you yourselves were foreigners in Egypt." And so God is using Moses to remind them, hey, you yourselves were immigrants. You were foreigners, and you were maltreated. You need to love those people. And then the last category on your list is respect for government leaders. And there's a couple verses there. Proverbs 24:21 says, "Fear the Lord and the king, my son, and do not join with rebellious officials." And then we also see 1 Peter 2:17, "Show proper respect to everyone, love the family of believers, fear God, honor the emperor." So we see the reference to the king or the emperor, but we can take that to include the leaders that we have over us. One more passage that's not on your notes, but it's just two verses from Romans chapter 13. "Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Consequently, whoever rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted, and those who do so will bring judgment on themselves." So we need to have that attitude of respect in many different directions, don't we? Jesus sums up this matter of respect in what we call the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 7:12. You see Jesus' golden rule. Would you read that with me? "In everything, do to others what you would want them to do to you. This sums up all the law and the prophets. So that sums up the 50 examples I could have given you, or the entire law and the prophets, the entire Bible, if you will, to do to others what you would want them to do to you. So the first thing that we need is to practice that respect. The second aspect, to be remarkable, I must learn to be reliable. And here's another definition. Reliable means being dependable, trustworthy, honest, and loyal. The Proverbs writer says, there are plenty of people who will tell you, you can trust me, but it is hard to find someone who is truly trustworthy. Have you ever heard somebody say, trust me, and afterwards you realize what a mistake? Boy, do I see reactions to that. We're called as Christ followers to be truly trustworthy, and that takes a building up, establishing of good habits. And habits are built over a lifetime. It's not just one time, but it's repeated good behavior, good attitudes. Number one, always tell the truth. Proverbs 17:7 says, respected people do not tell lies. Just this week, we invited Linda's co-worker and his family to the lake, and they came with a little 3-year-old named Anna. And Anna was just a delight to watch her, and she had a lot of fun doing different things at the lake. Anna's grandma was there. Anna's grandma is an old codger like me. I was in college with her back in the day. And she was telling me that how she would push Amanda in the park there in Watkins, and Anna would, she'd love to sing Down by the Bay when they'd get her on the swing. So I said to Anna maybe 10 minutes later, hey, Anna, I hear you know the song Down by the Day. Do you know that song? She said, I don't know that song. Her daddy is so gentle, so loving with her. He says, now, Anna, if you know that song and you said you didn't know that song, that was lying, wasn't it? You know? So he's starting with a 3-year-old, building the importance of telling the truth. Always tell the truth. A second habit that we need in order to develop reliability is always do what you promise. Proverbs 25:13. Reliable friends who do what they say are like cool drinks in sweltering heat, refreshing. That same day that we had Anna and her family at the lake, the boat driver can be out there for hours sometimes in the sun, and I didn't have a drink, and it was a nice, we do once in a while have a nice 85-degree day in New York State, and that was one of them that day. But I'm out there for a couple hours, and oh man, am I thirsty. And I got back and I really enjoyed a cool drink. Well, that's what keeping your promises is like a cool drink on a warm day. Psalm 15:4, they keep their promises to their neighbors even when it hurts. So 3 aspects of doing what you promise to do. A third habit is to keep confidential information. Read with me, would you, Proverbs 11:13. Gossips can't keep secrets, but a trustworthy person can. Somebody said, if you have a person gossip to you about others, you know they're going to be gossiping about you to others as well. I love it that we have prayer supporters at the end of each of our worship services, toward the end of the service. And I've recently come to call them confidential prayer supporters. I want to reinforce the importance that when somebody trusts you with a prayer request and they, in a measure, they're laying themselves bare before you, they need to feel like you're going to keep their confidence, that you're not going to be a gossip, that you're, in our membership covenant that we enter into every winter, as I talk about the state of the church, usually a part of that covenant is I refuse to gossip. You know what gossip can do to a church or any other human organization. So we have to be able to keep confidential information. A third aspect of being a remarkable person is I must learn to be resourceful. Resourceful can be defined as making the most of what I have and finding solutions to problems that others have overlooked. Sometimes there's a way not just to work harder, but to work smarter, and to have the wisdom to figure out a different way of approaching something that might be more effective. Paul was very resourceful, and he talks about it in Philippians 4:12. Incidentally, we know 4:13, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. What he says in the verse just before is equally important. Would you read that with me? I know how to live on almost nothing or with everything. I have learned the secret of living in every situation, whether it is with a full stomach or an empty one, with plenty or with little. He has learned to, an old translation, I've learned to abase or abound, to be abased or abound. I've learned to get along with a little or a lot. I've learned to be content, in other words. I think it's at one of the Mennonite produce stands that I like to go to in the summer. They have some sayings up on the wall behind the cash register. And I think it's something like this, says, content or discontent, which tent do you choose to live in? You know, I've shared with you in the last few weeks, I've been reading one of my new favorite authors, is a Catholic priest, about 10 years older than this old codger. And he talks about the first part of our life devoted to building the container. And then the rest of our life is examine the contents that we put in that container. Well, in the context of what Paul says here in Philippians 4:12, are you filling your container with contents or discontents? You know, think about that. A fourth aspect of becoming a remarkable follower of Jesus Christ is I must learn to be resilient. The definition for resilient is the ability to bounce back and recover from loss, failure, stress, or disappointment. A helpful little play on words that has gotten me through some disappointment has been disappointment often can prove to be his appointment. You know, I thought it should go this way, but God had a different way, and God's way is the best way. Proverbs 24:16, would you read that with me? When good people stumble, even if they fall 7 times, they will get back up. You know, watching a little child first learn to walk, some of you can reminisce about that. They fall down a lot, don't they? When we, even as adults, or even as we get to be old codgers, we may start falling down more again too. But walking is essentially falling until you catch yourself with your other step. So you take a step and you start to fall, and then it's kind of a weird way to think about it. But our life is a series of falls, caught, and regaining our balance and going forward again. We need to, if we're not to stumble, we need to remain humble. We need to remain dependent on God, because once we think we've got it, then we're really in deep doo-doo. A key to Pennsylvania Avenue United Methodist Church, I'm convinced, is our willingness to fail, our willingness to take a risk and to try something new. What if it doesn't work? Oh well, we'll see what we learn from it, and we'll go on from there. I think I remember that it was Thomas Edison, when he was inventing the light bulb, was looking for the right metal to put in that incandescent bulb. And he tried 800 different metals before he arrived at tungsten steel. And each time he failed, he said, well, that's progress. I know one more that won't work, you know. So if it takes 800 times, whatever it takes, we need to continue to try and to be resilient and to keep picking ourselves up and going the next step of the way. The last passage I would share with you is 2 Corinthians 4:8 and 9, where Paul says, we're often pressured from every side, but we're never crushed. Sometimes we don't know what to do, but we never despair. And sometimes we're attacked and abused, but God never abandons us. We get knocked down, but we get up again and keep going. Amen? I'd like to close in prayer, and as I pray out loud, if you would be saying something like this in your hearts and minds, Dear God, I want to stop blaming other people for my problems. I want to stop making excuses for my problems. I want to learn to be responsible. I want to learn to be reliable. I want to speak the truth and do what I say I'll do, and learn to keep confidences. I want to learn to be respectful for everybody, even if they disrespect me. They cannot control my response. I'm in control of my response. God, I want to learn to be like Jesus, to respect people and their dignity even if I disagree with them. To be resourceful. Help me to learn how to solve problems, to not wait for other people to solve my problems, to not wait for the government or anybody else, but to use the brain that you gave me. Help me to be not just resourceful and respectful, but to be resilient and reliable. God, you know the things that get me down. You know how many times I've wanted to give up. You know how many times I wanted to just throw in the towel. I'm asking for your help. Help me to remember, God, that all things work together for good for those who love you and are called according to your purpose. I want to be one of those people that when I fall 7 times, I get right back up. I want, starting this week, for the rest of my life to be different. I want this to be a turning point. Now, I would say to you that if you've been praying with me, if you've never opened your life to Jesus Christ, say something like this with me right now. Jesus, I want to get to know you. I don't understand it all. I want to get to know you. I want to learn to trust you. I'm going to ask you to fill my life with faith instead of fear, with love instead of insecurity, with purpose and meaning. I want to know your plan for my life. I don't want to start this journey by just saying to you, yes, Jesus Christ. I want to accept what you did for me on the cross, and I want to start growing. I want to live a remarkable life. And I humbly ask this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.